Today I'd like to reveal the dark, dirty secret of most of your opponents. They're playing this opening setup against you, hoping for you to fall for this fried liver attack which may arise from this line, and hoping to beat you quickly. However, what happens is, if you just don't fall for the trap, if you don't recapture here on d5, they actually don't know much about this and what to do next. Moreover, there are clever ways for you to turn the situation around and to fry them quickly, and I'll show you how you can do this. Of course, the main thing is you should not recapture because there is this follow-up with knight takes f7 followed by queen f3 check. Now instead you play knight a5, counter-attacking this bishop. And then you want to kick off this knight and pick up back this pawn on d5, so the only normal way for white to play here would be going bishop b5, at least gaining a tempo. Then you play c6, and now white is up a pawn. However, they need to move a bishop, and generally speaking they're disorganized. Like, most of their pieces are undeveloped, and these two which are developed, the knight and bishop, are rather a liability for them. You're gonna attack them both and gain more tempos for your own development. Anyway, right now they gotta do something about this bishop. Now they cannot take here because of your knight, and they cannot go there because of your knight as well, which leaves them with a couple other options. So they may move the bishop back somewhere to d3, which looks a little awkward but still possible, maybe e2, maybe a4, or they can also try to counterattack, being more creative and playing queen f3 and pinning your pawn to the rook. So these are the ways that white can use. We're going to talk about all of them so that you're fully covered. Let's start from the move bishop e2, which probably looks like the most solid way for white to play, just keeping everything well defended. What are you going to do then? Well, we want to develop, but we also want to take advantage of this exposed knight. You play h6 and you attack it. Now this square is controlled by your knight, therefore they move it back to f3. Now if they ever move it to h3, I mean, in most cases they don't, just because the knight is pretty badly placed there. It can't go anywhere really. These squares are already taken by your pawns. Plus, at any moment you can take there with your bishop and ruin his pawn structure. And let's not forget that he's probably going to castle there, which would expose his king. Therefore, moving the knight back to h3 is not a very appealing option. In most cases, they're going to go here. But from f3, they're getting under one more attack from your pawn. Now they're going to move the knight again. What should they do? If they undevelop with the knight on g1, I always recommend that you suggest your opponent to put the bishop back to f1 on the next move and try it again, because here clearly it didn't work out for them this time. Now, the knight cannot go here on d4 because of your queen, and the only remaining square is e5. Now, and the first intent of black would be probably to attack this knight again somehow, maybe with your bishop, and gain one more tempo. But although it's possible, a completely fine move, but it's actually not the strongest in my opinion, because if you do that, the problem is white has a comfortable way to defend it, if they can figure it out, is to move pawn d4. And by doing so, they solidify the knight, and generally speaking, get some central presence, and that's alright. So therefore, you could not actually win a tempo by attacking the knight. Therefore, I recommend that you play bishop c5 instead, actually aiming to prevent this move d4, because now you control this square twice, and they can't move the pawn there, or else you'll just take it. Which means that, yeah, right now you do not attack the knight on e5, and they'll probably castle, but the knight still remains to be somewhat hanging, and you can take advantage of that on the next move with queen d6. So this time we're activating the queen, and we're hitting the knight. Now, in most cases, they're going to move the knight either here or here. And before they know it, they're going to be cooked. Now, your knight takes away, your pawn takes away these two squares. They are not available, therefore it leaves him, in most cases, with this choice. The vast majority of your pawns will play either to g4 or to c4. Now, what if they go to g4? Now, there is a very interesting way here to use something like the Stafford Gambit idea, which allows you usually to win the game within the next couple moves. And it's funny, because your opponent is certainly completely unaware of what's going on here. He thinks that he's playing right moves. But what you can do is to trade on g4 first, and then you follow up with h5. Notice that we don't castle, because we want our rook to actually stand there and to support our attack. Now, after the bishop goes somewhere, you then follow up with knight to g4. And all of a sudden, there is checkmate in threat, queen takes h2, thanks to our knight adding up to our attack there as well. Now, they can take or cover, but in both cases I'll show you what to do. For example, if they play g3, just trying to block this diagonal, what do you do then? Well, there's a really spectacular way for you to develop your attack. You can sack your knight right here. After the king takes, you can even sack your bishop right here just to expose the king completely, and then you follow up with h4, and what is done? There is no defense already. What's the point? Well, you attack this pawn, it's pinned by the queen. You also threaten pawn takes with the attack of the king and rook, but on top of all that, very important is that we've got this rook on the h-file. And as soon as you move the pawn away, your rook is gonna take part in your attack and is gonna be killing white within a couple of moves. The most played move by white here is rook to g2, somewhat trying to consolidate, but pawn takes, and this is actually a double check by the pawn and rook. When there is double check, the king must move out, but then you just keep checking it, check, followed by rook h1, and it's going to be checkmate on the next move, rook g1, and then you can take it, or even play fancy queen f2 checkmate. The other way for white to counter this checkmating threat is trying to take this knight away by exchanging. But that also helps you to open up the file for your rook, and queen h2 is still a threat. Therefore, white has to play g3 right now. Also notice that he can't ever push the f-pawn forward in any of these lines because of your bishop that pins this pawn down to the king. So g3 is a move for white to play. And now there are different ways for you to continue your attack, but I'll have the most energetic, the most fascinating move. Rook takes h2. And initially it seems like this sacrifice comes from nowhere, but in fact it actually makes a lot of sense, because if you think about this in general, like, white is mostly underdeveloped. That's number one. Number two is most of his pieces are actually on the queen side, which means that the king side was abandoned and unprotected. And you do want to take advantage of that by going hard on the king side and attacking there viciously. So rook takes h2 makes perfect sense. Actually, I learned this idea from Garry Kasparov. He said this thing that if you imagine just in your head dividing the board by left side and right side, and you notice that most of his pieces are there on the queen side, it gives you a clear hint that you should attack on the king side. So rook takes h2. By the way, if you want to learn more of these ideas about how to become an aggressive attacking player, I've got a free masterclass about this, so you can check it out by clicking the link below in the description. I've got more about it covered there. So right now, let's stick with this fried liver attack theme. So if white takes, then you continue with queen h6, and fundamentally you want to attack white along the h-file and win. Now, the king is better to be moved back to g1, because if it goes to g2, you will anyway play queen h3, but then it would come with a check. Therefore, it's better for white to keep there. But even though now it comes without a check, white is still defenseless. Now, there are two ways here for you to attack on the next move after white plays something. One is queen takes g3. Pretty cool, and it's easy for white to overlook it, taking advantage of the fact that this pawn is pinned, and therefore it is not a loss of a queen. Now, the other thing is that after white plays whatever, doesn't matter, you can castle, then play rook h8 and queen h1 checkmate. And again, white is defenseless. Actually, yeah, I can play something, but no matter what, you're going to do this. So that's how you win. Going back to the starting position of the two knights game, now we're attacking the bishop. So far, we've been talking about bishop e2, one of the solid ways for white, seemingly solid way for white to play. Then you start gaining tempos by attacking this knight, e4, the knight goes, and here you play this key move bishop c5 without letting him push his pawn to the square. After he castles, you play queen d6, gaining a tempo, and so far we have seen that knight g4 leads to devastating attack. How about knight to go into c4? What about that? Well, yeah, this kind of double attacks you, but that's not a problem because that actually allows you to trade off your bad placed knight from the edge of the board. So you trade it off, and right now you don't even have to waste any tempos for playing h5. You can go forward with knight g4 right away. For lack of bishop on e2, white cannot take it at all, and your bishop also guards the knight. So queen h2 is a threat. After white goes g3, there is little nice tactics that allows you to win the game on the spot. Is knight takes f2, and we're hitting the queen. We're creating all kinds of threats. After white takes it, we trade off everything, and then we follow up with queen d4. That's this little thing that allows us to win the game. So we double attack, and after the king moves somewhere, then we pick up the bishop, and now we won the exchange, so we're up material, but on top of that, this king is dead open, and it will be very easy for you to attack it after that and to win. Alright, another thing that I love about this position in particular is that the most natural and most played move by white, bishop a4, turns out to be wrong and leads white to losing position. Now we play same stuff, we go pawn h6, attacking the knight. After it goes, we continue with e4, gaining more space, pressing white, and gaining one more tempo. And what's nice about this position is that as soon as they go knight e5, they're going to lose a piece to your queen d4, double attack to their bishop and knight. So that's what they usually overlook. But the problem is they don't have much to do, because if the knight goes back to g1, it's completely passive, and you'll just keep attacking them with bishop c5, targeting this thing, etc. If they play queen e2, trying to delay the inevitable, it doesn't change anything, because, yeah, like for one move, they pin your pawn, but you can unpin it with bishop e6, and they still are left with the same trouble. The knight has to go. It can't go here because of your queen. You're gonna win it. It can't go here because of your pawn. It can go here because then you can go g5 and the knight is still trapped, and therefore in most cases they will still play knight e5, but then you counter that with queen d4, this double attack which they overlooked, which allows you to win a piece. Now, what's the thing? If they take on c6, of course it's important not to recapture with the knight. That would be a terrible blunder. Instead, you just win the bishop right here, and you've got an extra piece. But in all these variations, by the way, it's not just about a piece that you win, because on top of that, you have a much more active position and great attack. So that's even more impressive, and that makes your position completely winning. Now, apart from that, they can also take on c6 with a bishop, which is more persistent than you take. And now this knight is still alive, but it's too far away from the rest of his army, and you can win it. You can play queen c5 and win it, but what I like, which is slightly more evil, is queen d5, because you're kind of pushing him in trying to hold on to this knight, but that is actually wrong. Now, from here, the queen controls all these squares. Our bishop takes away that square, so the knight has no way to retreat. If white wants to save the knight there, we're going to play here queen a6, but now they both are somewhat hanging. So we keep attacking the knight, bishop d7, it still has to go. Again, our bishop takes away this square, so they're going to go here. Now you play bishop b4, you attack the knight once more, and now they happily retreat back to b3, thinking that they were smart and they found a way to get away with this knight. But then you play bishop b5, and all of a sudden it turns out that their queen is now trapped. So that's what I like about this line. In one game, white decided to be super tricky. He played c4, still trying to complicate matters. Black recaptured, now I thought, oh, now my queen is free to go here, but it was queen e2 checkmate. Some of your opponents will play this aggressive move queen f3. Since white was looking for the fried liver attack, they're tricky, they're aggressive, they want to attack you and trick you and win quickly. And what they're trying to do here is to attack this pawn twice, but also to pin it down to the rook. And they hope that it's going to help them to keep attacking you. What I recommend that you do against this is just to sacrifice the exchange, and after queen e8 to play this bishop e7 move, which looks calm and looks like black just lost material. But the reality is completely different. White is still underdeveloped, and the only two pieces which they have developed, which are queen and knight, are rather their problems. So this queen on a8 is in the corner of the board, and there is always a risk that down the road it's going to be captured in some lines when you play bishop b7, queen b6, castle, you know. So this queen is in danger. And the knight on g5, we know from many lines that we have analyzed that there are always ways for you to attack it with h6 and gain temples. Therefore, white is in trouble. And of course, I don't expect you to remember all these lines that I'm sharing with you, but let's not forget that your opponent probably knows nothing, right? So just learning these couple attacking patterns is going to be extremely helpful. And you simply want to finish your development quickly, attack, and knowing some of these tactical patterns will definitely be helpful. Now, for bishop a7, white usually realizes that their queen is somewhat cornered, they want to get out, and they take on a7. Because it looks like, hey, not only now my queen is not trapped, but I also got a pawn along the way. This turns out to be the final and deadly mistake. Because after that, you've got a force in sequence. Knight goes back to c6, which is nice. We're bringing the knight back into the active game. We hit the queen along the way. After the queen moves, you then go knight to d4. And we rerouted the knight to this extremely active position. Now we're threatening knight takes c2, which is going to be a royal fork to the king, queen, and rook. And white is already defenseless. Moreover, there is one more thing which white typically overlooks here. The fact that apart from knight takes c2, there is also one more threat that you've got in this position, which is to take advantage of this undefended knight. And you can do that by jumping with your knight from f6, usually to g4, hitting the queen, sometimes to d5, hitting the queen, and from there, it's gonna open up this bishop to capture the knight. So that is the second threat which they're unaware of, because they're only focused on this one. But even countering this one is actually impossible, because there's just no way. In one game, white played queen c3, trying to defend it with the queen, but there follows knight to d5, hitting the queen again. They're still trying to hold on to this pawn, so they're going queen d3, and now black actually could execute this second threat, which we were talking about, bishop takes g5, which would give black a winning game. But it's even stronger to go bishop f5, actually just keep mounting the pressure. We're attacking the queen as well as this pawn. Now white retreated with the knight, hoping that, okay, now I'm safe, but here comes knight b4, attacking the queen once again, as well as this square, so that is a complete nightmare. Right? Queen comes here, now knight takes c2, check to the king moves, and now black captured the knight. So not only they capture the knight, they're going to capture the rook So they executed both of their threats, actually. White played d3, trying to at least gain some tempo, attack the bishop, but it's not backing down. Black goes bishop takes g2, and that was a complete devastation. Queen to d5 check, x-rays the rook. If white tries to, cover, there is queen takes f3 because we've got this handy knight on d4. If the king comes here, trying to also hold on to this rook, we've got knight e2, and we got him. So now we attack everything, then you take the queen, then you take the rook, and you win the game. So there are just way too many threats for black here to execute. The weird looking move bishop d3 actually makes some sense because it allows white to counter your main threat. h6 followed by e4 and all that stuff chasing away this knight. Now if you go h6, the knight can retreat not to f3 or h3 to those awkward squares, but to the central square e4, and white's doing well here. That's why in this case I recommend that you play the other move. And the move is knight to g4. You do onto them what they did to you. So you go knight g4 and you want to counter attack them. You want to put pressure down to this pawn, but also you're opening up the diagonal for your queen, and therefore the knight is attacked. Also, we're taking advantage of the fact that white's position becomes clumsy with this bishop on d3. They can't move this pawn, therefore they can't develop this bishop, as well as the queen is kind of locked, so all this construction is a little bit clumsy. And we want to take advantage of that and attack the kingside. So we go knight g4. Anyway, right now they have to do something about this knight. As they move the knight back, you can then play f5. That's another advantage of moving your knight away. We give way to our pawn to be pushed forward and to gain more tempos. Now after knight to g3, you could play e4 and gain a tempo, but it's even stronger to go bishop c5, and we turn things around, and we're using the fried liver attack idea against them. So they have to guard this pawn. You want to attack it either with a bishop and check the king, or with a knight and fork the queen and rook. Therefore they gotta do something about this. If they castle, you then throw the queen out, creating this checkmate and threat of queen takes h2, and before they know it, it's all over. Have to play h3, but now knight takes f2. We're still making use of our bishop, rook takes, queen takes g3, and now, so at the very least, we're gonna win the exchange down here on f2, and overall, you're having more active position. You can win one more tempo by going e4 later on, and objectively speaking, it's winning. I mean, you do not checkmate white right away, but you are up material, and it should be winning. Once again, I do not mean to say that you need to memorize all these variations, of course it is unreal, but in chess in order to win you just need to know a little bit more than your opponent, and knowing this information hopefully is going to be very helpful. As always, I do encourage you to learn how to find attacking moves on your own, and these free masterclass that I'll link down below may help you do just that. You can check these out. Also, if you're interested in how to learn chess efficiently, even if you have very little time available for chess, I'd recommend that you check out this video where I break it down exactly how to study chess in the most efficient way possible.